Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? Hopefully wonderful. Welcome to a TrueFire Live. Tonight we've got an amazing show, I think, lined up. Glad to see everyone here. Wanted to basically just say, chime in with where you're at. Drop that in the chat if you can, maybe where you're tuning in from. And of course, if you've got questions for Matthew as the night goes on, drop them in the chat. We're going to get to as many of those as possible. Matthew's got a bunch of really cool stuff that he's going to teach, but we will try to get to as many questions as we can. So drop those in there. I'll be pulling those out. But definitely drop in where you're watching from. Man, we got folks from Orlando, Ottawa. Love it. All over the place. Got a good group here tonight, and Matthew is going to drop some amazing knowledge, I'm sure, because if you're a Matthew Lee fan, you know he's an amazing player with a ton of teaching experience as well. So without further ado, I'm going to basically turn it over to the man who is going to talk about sort of getting started with honky tonk guitar. So Matthew, how are you doing, my friend?
How's it going, Jeff? Good to see you. Greetings from Nashville.
Absolutely, man. It's so good to have you here. I'm going to basically jump out of here. I'll jump back in once we get some questions in here, but I'm going to turn this over to you, and you just go ahead and do your thing. Tell us a little bit about the honky tonk guitar and do some picking and grinning. All right.
That sounds great. So first of all, thank you so much for joining in. I see a lot of the people from Wisconsin are saying hi, and I really appreciate you guys and gals stopping in, and hopefully I've got some stuff for you. So basically what this is going to be about is we're talking quite a bit about basically what are some of the elements and what makes up being a honky tonk guitar player. So I've kind of broken it down, and what I'm going to do is just give some examples. I'm going to try to have it work for people that may be a little bit more basic, a little bit intermediate, and some advanced concepts, but mostly just stuff that are great building blocks and things that you need to know to get this sound. So whether you're a blues player, a rock player, a pop player, or you just kind of dabble in country, the idea is to kind of get you maybe focused on some of these elements that I believe are key components in the core of being a great country guitar player. So the first one is pretty simple. It's single note lines. So those are the lines that kind of are, I call them the glue or connective tissue of maybe your solo or fills or a melodic line that is the signature hook of a song. Those are always, I call them money licks, because the session players call them money licks because they help facilitate them to get called back again. So those single note lines are just going to be one note at a time. So you're not playing anything too crazy. But in country guitar, I'm not going to go too in depth on theory and just like all sorts of out there concepts. Let's just talk about a scale that you've got to know to get going on this. So if you're, let's start in A, and I call this the country composite scale. Now it has certain notes in it and it lacks certain notes, and then we're going to add one to make it even more beefed up. So the notes are going to be A, B, C, C sharp, E, F sharp, and A. So that's kind of like if I were to just do a little kind of a bluegrass lick, that's basically the concept between that. Now, the other thing as a guitar player is this is the way that I think about things, especially with single note lines and the ability to go from one section of the guitar all the way up the neck, is I think of them in components like this. So this hand shape, maybe this hand shape from 5 to 8, and then from 9 to 12, and then it just repeats. So if I were to take something like this, that country composite scale is used in a lot of different licks and is the basis and kind of the stepping stones, if you will, for single note lines. There's a lot of other stuff. Trust me, I could talk about this for an hour, but that's one that you definitely should know. Now, if we were to add one extra note to it, and keep in mind, we're playing over a chord A. They're just just jamming on A. So this works over A. So if you're doing Working Man, that might be a good little lick to start off with. So the other thing that country guitar players do in a honky tonk setting is they may also make that one chord a dominant seventh chord or an A7. That adds another note because those dominant chords are 4-note chords, not 3-note chords. That extra note is a G note. So now this scale kind of becomes. And that's just one position in this lower position right here. You can take those notes. So it's A, B, C, C sharp, E, F sharp, G, and then A. And you can work getting all the way up the neck. They're in all these different brackets, if you will, for the guitar. It makes it really great to be able to use that as the connective tissue. So. That was just using that scale and me just kind of improvising on it. There was one extra note in there. I put a D in there, but that's just me kind of improvising on it. So the idea is to get that underneath your hands. That helps out a lot. Now, keep in mind, when the chord changes, all those change, but that's a great example of a single note line. We're going to talk more about single note lines, but let's move on to double stops. These are a super key component. Think Jerry Reed, think Brent Mason, think those are two names that really come to mind in this. And all you're doing is you're adding another note to that. So you're basically doing a 2-note type of vibe. And let's still stay in A. So now that we have a couple of these notes, let's work our way from getting one part of the neck to the other. So we're going to go from this position up here, and it's a super little lick. And what you're going to wind up doing is playing 2 notes at once. So you're playing this. And we can make it more and more complex from there, but that's just the gist of it. Now, here's the other thing is you can use your pick, and I'm going to talk more about the right hand, but for now, let's just go ahead and roll with this lick. Okay, let's walk it down now. Now let's make it a little bit more interesting from there. So all you're doing is you're kind of chromatically going up. Now keep in mind, we're not thinking country composite. We're thinking the chord A, and we're working our way into another bracket or part of the neck. That's also super important. But as you get to know the neck, it's really important to have kind of a mastery of at least one section and then be able to make the transition. That always helps. So like, now let's like walk it down a little bit more. So basically you're kind of thinking 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, and then you're doubling it there. That's all you're doing is you're winding up doing 2 notes at once. Now you can use the pick or you can use your middle finger here. Once again, we'll talk more about the right hand. Here's one more lick, which is a great example. So you might want to do, let's do something higher, okay? And let's do a walk down. So we're in A, keep in mind, and we're just doing a little bluesy walk down. So it's going to be this lick. Okay, so what you're doing is now you're using different fingers. So it's going to be the 3rd finger and then the 1st finger, 14th fret with that finger, and you're kind of keeping that same shape, and index finger on the 12th fret of the E string, ring finger on the 14th fret of the B string. All you're doing is walking it down. Now you're using the middle and the index here. That's a great example of what a double stop is. You're going to hear them all over the place. It's an essential component. It is a pillar of the guitar type of vibe. So if I were to kind of improv or lick on that, I might do something like this. they're all over the place. So the important thing to wind up doing is just learn some of these licks. That's why I'm kind of just giving breadcrumbing it on that. But it's an important style to wind up being able to do. And I'm going to show you more examples as I show you elements in some of the performance examples. So that's just definitely something that you want to work on. If you feel that you're weak on something, that's where your homework should lie. So that's single notes, that's double stops. Let's take a look at some bending, because that's where it gets real twangy. And that's what kind of defines honky tonk music. So let's stay in A. And let's do a bending lick. What is that? Well, what it is you're bending a string, and there will be another string. So it's kind of a double note and with a bend. Let's do this. So we're resolving it. Keep in mind, we're thinking in A, we're over an A dominant 7th chord. We are going to be using our pinky in this one. And it's a full step bend. Now you're resolving it. So you're thinking over A, you're playing over an A dominant 7th chord. Pinky stays here, stationary, and then you're going to wind up using your middle and ring finger here. It's a cool little lick that works great over A, and there's not a ton of movement. You just want to make sure as you bend notes that they're a half step or a full step. You want to make sure they're in tune. So that's a cool little lick. Now, what the right hand does, which is kind of the next thing that I kind of want to talk about, is a great way of, it's a gas brake kind of thing. So the right hand is a quintessential thing that makes honky tonk a little bit different than some other styles, because you're doing using a handsy approach. You're adding that element of twang. So you're kind of mimicking what a steel guitar would do, like. So what happens there is you're using this right hand as kind of extra picks. And a great way of thinking about it that way is that just do this. This is a super simple thing, but it's a great way of practicing this. Okay, let's just break it down a little bit, and let's just play an open E chord and go pick, middle, ring. Now what that territory has is you're going to be playing one string with the pick, one string with your middle finger, one string with the right, the ring finger. So on this right hand, so what you're going to wind up doing is you have territory now for that right hand, pick, middle, ring. And it's a great way of just practicing if you're just getting into it. And don't worry, these are my nails right here. You don't need nails. If it's something that's new to you, it takes a little bit, but this is a quintessential part and pillar of being able to do this honky tonk style. Those are just nice little triplets that work out really well. So now we have single notes, double stops, bending notes, or pedal steel type of licks, and they're all over the place as well. And then the right hand is the one that connects it. So I use my pick. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but this is the way that I do it, where you can get that nice twangy sound. So you get something like more double stops. That's the generalized concept. Now, as we go into these performances that we're going to play for you rather shortly, keep in mind just, okay, cool, that's a single note line. Oh, cool, that's a bend right there. Oh, cool, that's he's doing a right hand technique right there. Oh, that's a double stop. Those are all elements when I write a solo or play a solo or improv a solo. Those are all things that you want to make sure that you have underneath your fingers. So as we move along here, what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about some of the other intangibles, and then we're going to do a track for you. So basically, now that you've got a little bit of the basics down, there's another thing, open string lines. Those are really cool. I'll give you one right now, and what that includes is that's basically strings that are ringing against each other. So you get a rub, if you will, between certain strings. Let's keep something super simple. Now, kind of thinking in the same notes that I gave you for that country composite scale. Don't worry too much about the notes. Worry about the phrasing of it and the technique of it. Notice also what's going on with the right hand. So there you've got a pinky as well. So it's okay. These open string lines are a great way of, think Chet Atkins, think Merle Travis, think Jerry Reed did a lot of those. Those are some quintessential things that really help out in spicing your playing up. So the other things that you want to kind of keep track of is your phrasing. Use the melodic line, which helps you in playing over these changes. Also, when you're learning a song, just learn the solo, how the session player or famous guitar player did it. That's a great way of doing it. Keep in mind that there are multiple different grooves, which we're going to showcase coming up very shortly. And what should I feel? What should I play? What should the rhythm be going on? Because I call it the 85-15 rule. Mostly you're going to be playing rhythm, but when you solo, this is your chance to shine. There are a lot of different ways to approach it. As I have already mentioned, you've got 4 main ones that you definitely want to keep in mind. And then the other thing as a honky tonk player, other than the fact that learning some theory, the Nashville number system does help out. If you don't know what that is, there are references online to help you out with that. I have a bunch of stuff on my channel that talks a little bit more about that in depth. You don't necessarily need to learn it in the beginning. The idea is to figure out what your strengths are, what are your weaknesses, and work on those weaknesses and understand what you're doing. So as we get in to the next kind of phase of this lesson, let's showcase a style that would define honky tonk music, that you might walk into a bar if you're down here in Nashville. And what would you hear? You would definitely hear this first style or this first groove, which is going to be a country shuffle. What that has in it, if you're a blues player, you've already played shuffles. So basically, as far as the rhythm goes on this, you're having this is in D, by the way. So just playing this D chord here, and you're kind of accenting those ups. When you listen to a drummer, follow the kick drum and the snare. They will give you the proper rhythm and pattern for it, and the hi-hats will divide the beat. So that's going to be the feel. So you're kind of like on the upchuck for the rhythm component of this. That's what's going to be going on in the background. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the chord changes in this and maybe a lick or two from it. This is going to be from one of my courses, and I just created a nice little solo that outlines all these different changes. And let's go ahead, Jeff, and if we could cue that, that would be great. So as you're checking this out, hopefully what was going through your head is like, okay, that's a country shuffle. I played one before. That's not a big deal. Is just understanding, all right, he played a single note line there into a bend. There was a lot of double stops going on. What was his right hand doing? Those are all key components that really showcase exactly what I'm talking about. So let's take one of these licks from this country shuffle. If you also noticed and were harmonically listening to it, there was a chord that was out of the key. Now, when people say 1, 4, 5 in the song, hopefully you know what that is. If you don't, the typical chords are those 3 core chords, which are going to be D, or just cowboy chords, D, G, and A. You're going to play them over and over and over, and they're in a million songs. But I threw a little bit of a curveball, harmonically speaking, and there's going to be an E in there as well. That's not in the key, so it's going to sound a little bit different, and it gives you a chance to kind of break out of the diatonic box, if you will. So when you're playing over stuff, understand the chord changes that are underlying what you're going to be shining on. So a cool little lick that I like from this is, if you also notice, there's a bend that's the exact same thing that I kind of showed you earlier over the E chord. Okay, so over that E chord. So that's going to be the middle finger doing the bend there, because you're kind of simulating a B bender, and your pinky's going to be on the 4th fret, middle finger on the 3rd fret, bend it a full step. So you get that type of vibe from it. So that's a cool little lick right there. If you notice, there was something going on in the on the back half of that. That's a cool little double stop lick. Okay, so now if we resort back to those 4 pillars, that's one of them right there. That lick right there is going to go like this. Okay, so it's kind of that bluegrassy type of lick, but it chromatically walks up. It's a great little way to start out a line or to even end a line. And these are the fingers used. So once again, and if you notice what's going on with the right hand here. And if you notice, I also put a dead note in there so you can get kind of a cluck. Now, all I did is I added another element, which is staying right here in this box right here. So you get this. Now, if we were to add another element to it, making it up the neck a little bit more, you might want to do something like this. That's very similar, if not almost exact, to the one that I originally showed you in A. So if you were to extend that, you get something like this. If you notice, you're also up in this box right here where the bar chord D is. So you're going to see that if you understand the cage system, or if you don't, that's not a big deal. But what you're doing is you're using the shapes of the chord and kind of chromatically making your line a little bit more interesting harmonically, meaning that you're adding notes that aren't in the scale. So that's a cool one. And so that country shuffle in G is a great example of what to expect if you're in a traditional honky tonk, okay? Because they play those. There's lots of dancers and all sorts of fun stuff for that. But it's using all 4 of the pillars that we talked about. So if you notice, as I start to showcase these performances, they're all in there, and those are the key components of it. So let's move to the next example, which is going to be, we're going to be playing over a train beat. Now, this is in a different key, and what we're going to be doing here, to give you a little bit of a background on this, is it's in a different key, and I'm going to be showcasing all those same things. You just mix them and jumble them up in a different way. Keep in mind, in order to make things musical, you really want to highlight the chord and have something going on with your phrasing. So there's rhythmic elements to it. So we're thinking in C here, and it's going to be kind of a soft train beat, so it's not ridiculously fast. And what's going on in this is you're basically just going to be playing over a 1-4-5. There are some other elements that are fun to do, and I'm going to show you them after we listen to it. So now that we've got that queued up, Jeff, if we could just check out the train beat, then I'm going to talk a little bit about it. All right, that's a train beat in the key of C. It's just going to be C, F, and G going on. That's what's happening underneath. If you notice, there's all those 4 elements were once again showcased in that. So there's one thing that's actually kind of pretty cool is I haven't talked too much about this, which is chicken picking, which is basically you're using dead notes and then doing a bend and kind of incorporating that into your lick. If you notice, like when you come up with licks, that you can use these 4 components to just about do anything. So this lick happens and it's over the C chord and it's going to sound like this. It's where you use a half step bend and you're in this box of C. And so you're raking with the pick. And then the final component of that is so if you notice, I'm landing on the target note or the root of that chord. So without getting too much in theory, you can land on a bunch of different notes for the chord, but that's a great way of kind of outlining and doing some kind of chicken picking or using dead notes, which also was an element of that twang. So one more other thing that's in this that I think is great without going through all the lines, because this is in a course, keep in mind, that's already up on TrueFire. So basically, we're going to be playing, let's do a bending thing that's super simple, but it's super cool. Okay. So we're still playing over the C chord and it's notated as a C7. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit hipper by bending up to notes. So we're using the bends and this is a double stop. So it's a kind of a combo move. So what it does is it does this. Now, you don't have to necessarily do the top note, but if we were to just do a 2-note lick, it sounds like this. So that works really good. It's a great way to begin a lick, or if you just want to give some space, because you don't need to be playing a ton of notes all the time. It's a great little lick. And if you want to practice on your right hand, the great way to do it would be like this. Don't use your pick. So that works out really nicely. So like if I'm coming up with a little lick, that might be something if I wanted to create space, or if I wanted to make it more busy, I might be like. So if you notice there, I actually split it up just a little bit. So I went. That's another way of actually adding chicken picking elements to your playing. It's the use of dead notes or clucks. And all I'm doing is I'm taking notes that work with that chord and moving them up the neck. So that's at the 7th fret and then the 8th fret. You're bending on the 7th fret of the G string, by the way. So you're simulating kind of a G bender, which some tellies wind up having. I don't have any of that stuff. I do it all with my hands. So my hands have to do the work. Okay, that's another great lick. And that creates a little bit of movement as well, because it puts you from one box to the other. As you're soloing, it's super, super important to kind of realize where you are and understand the territory that you're in. That's a great little lick right there. And if I wanted to extend it a little bit more. Okay, that one right there is going to be at the 15th fret, the 17th fret of the B string and the 15th fret of the G string. And I'm using my middle finger and then my pinky. If you notice on my right hand, I'm doing that as well. And the other thing that allows you that right hand to do is, like I said, it's kind of a gas and a brake kind of thing. So it gives you, you can even mute it. Now it's really getting up the neck, and that's a great way of just getting around and playing over a chord. So as you start to to practice and get through, the playing that you're doing. Work on being able to understand one element and then being able to get it up the neck. I see Jeff on the screen. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great, man, and you're doing great. This is amazing info, really good stuff. I've got a couple questions that have come in, so I'm going to
That's
throw
great.
those
Let's do
at
them.
you. So let's do some questions. So one is actually related to kind of what you were just talking about, which was chicken picking. So someone was asking, how do you get started with that? So do you have any tips or a couple licks for somebody to work on to just start out? They're just trying to understand chicken picking and seeing how that works. Give me a little of that.
Yeah, that's a great question because it is such a cool thing, and it really defines kind of this honky tonk style that we're talking about. Let's make it even more simple, so we're not doing a double note bend or anything, or going up the neck or anything like that. This is a great lick. It's kind of a Hank Jr. style lick. He ends a lot of songs that way, and I use it actually quite often. So let's just do that. So let's stay in C. So we're going to be up here on the neck, and a great way of kind of doing that. Now I'm using my fingers in this because it's just more comfortable for me and allows me more control in my hand. But if you're literally bending the 10th fret on the E string, and you can use your pick if you wanted to, you just get more control and more staccato, or like tightness, if you will, or percussiveness. Okay, so it's on the 10th fret bending and then bringing it down to the 8th fret. It's a full bend and then a half bend. And if you wanted to make it more complicated, that way you're ending on a C note, and that would be on the 7th fret of the G string, and then ending on the 5th fret of the G string. So that's a great way to kind of like start off with that. If you want to make it more complicated, which I understand you're just starting out, sometimes people are handsy. I'm more a handsy type person because I have a classical background. So I might do something like this, and just watch this hand. Do you notice how like you're cutting off certain parts of that note? That's kind of the rhythm that you're going for. It's more rhythmic than it is anything else. And I think that that's a key component to it. That's a great way of getting started. And it's trial and error. So it's going to take a little bit. So do everything super slow. And just like you're learning a lick, get a metronome out, play with backing tracks if you can, or some sort of drumming, because that will let you know, hey, I need to shift it this way. I need to shift it this way. Like, it keeps you in rhythmic line. And that's an important thing in order to be able to, once you play with a live person, I think that that's an important thing, is to help your phrases out, to be able to work on your rhythm and your subdivisions and where your syncopation is, and just understanding that. It's something that every guitar player, I think, should. Yes, Jeff?
Absolutely. Good answer, man. Good answer. Another question. Ted says, I'm trying to play country, but it just keeps sounding like blues. So any tips for someone who, just can't get that country sound? And obviously you've given a lot of great pointers in the things you need to do, but how would you take someone who's, a blues player, can play okay blues, make it sound a little more country? What's your tips for that?
Well, blues and country are not too far off. So if you understand the blues scale and you're using the blues scale, the idea behind this is it's kind of in this, I would say, it's a little bit more in the phrasing, and a little bit more in the fact that if you're going through it, there's one note in that country composite scale, or the thing that I originally first showed you, that blues tends to stay away from. Let's take a look at a blues scale. Let's use A. Okay, that's just an A blues scale. Okay, well, one note that's you're going to hear a lot in country is this, which isn't in the blues scale. Okay. Now, I picked every note. One way to be able to do that is maybe incorporate the right hand a little bit and try using some of those double stops to add a little bit of flair to the line that you're doing. It will start to, it is in blues. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying another way to do that is just start listening to some country and see how they kind of phrase things, which is just it's different than blues. They both share some similarities, and in another style, the blues players tend to play on the back of the beat. Country players are a little bit more aggressive and on the front of the beat. So it's also a rhythmic element. I would say try starting with a little bit more double stops. Maybe you can start including a little bit of hybrid playing in your lines, and a little bit more snapping, a little bit more staccato. So, like if you're playing blues, you might think about. And think about what's going on in that right hand. That would probably be one way that I'd recommend to wind up just changing things up a little bit. And keep in mind, if you're so rooted in blues, you could just take one step over to the side of country, listen to a lot of it, hear how they're phrasing, especially in your favorite artists. Or just get on Spotify and, they would come up with a playlist for you. I would recommend that because it's just the way things are phrased. There are a lot of similarities between blues and country, especially when you're talking about shuffles. It's just the way that you play it and express it. And by using some different notes, maybe the use of double stops, the use of your right hand, and those bends, believe it or not, you'll just start to flavor it in there a little bit. And I think that's a great way to start, at least.
Yeah, that is a great way to start it. I believe someone else said, because when you put that major third in there, you can think about major pentatonic versus minor pentatonic, and that's kind of what you're doing by adding that major third in there, basically. Right?
Yeah,
add a little bit more of a major flavor there.
Yeah, a major flavor. But if you take a look at, without getting too much involved, there's a lot of chromaticism going on. And what that means is there are 12 notes possible. That's why we have 12 frets. So really kind of what you're doing is you're adding a little bit more chromaticism, because I would also say, well, keep the flat third in there, or the C note. Now you have it's an extra note, but actually it adds some really fun stuff. But yes, they are correct in that. And as you first get started out, I would say kind of be religious about the scales, but eventually let the shackles come off, because you've just got to be able to see the chords. And one way to be able to do that is understand what notes are in that chord and how you get from one chord to the other, in a great case of both blues and country, as you go from the A chord to the D chord.
Nice. Love it. All right. So I got one more question, and then we're going to go back and do another performance, I think. But someone's asking about these courses. Yes. Matthew has, I think, 4 different courses on TrueFire. He's got a channel at TrueFire. The link below the video will send you to his page with all of his stuff, so you can check out all the things. He's actually covered some songs at TrueFire as well. So if you're digging what he's doing, and I'm sure you are, you can go check it all out there. So one other question that was asked about the open string licks basically said, hey, those sort of discordant notes that you're holding, and the open strings ringing out as you go into another one.
Yes.
For this person said they just sound wrong for them. So how do you actually make them sound cool? Any tips on how to sort of make those flow better and not sound like he's playing wrong notes?
I think the idea is to have think about them in groupings of 3, because if you notice that, let's go back to this and let's make it super simple. Let's do so yeah, that does sound wrong. That's pretty dissonant. That's outlining an A7 chord, which is, if you take these notes, that's the upper part to a A7 chord. They do sound a little bit, but music is about tension and then release. And I think that's an important thing to think about is if, I love doing that lick right there. And all that is you're using, and if you notice what's going on with the right hand there, and you can also, is the same thing. Now we just went from maybe not so pretty to pretty, because now we're doing certain things to the note, if you will, or the chord, if you will, that are adding some color tones, if you will. So if you've got, that's much prettier, and that could be your tension and then resolve right there, and you're literally not moving any of your fingers other than going to a different string set or groupings of 3. And that's the important thing to think about is if you notice what was going on with here, and if you want, you can add, they're all over the place. I mean, I could do an hour on open strings because I just think that they're the coolest thing. And once I heard them, it changes the way that you think about things. Because if you're a scale guy like I was a rocker for such a long period of time, it just was weird and uncomfortable to have no fingers playing a note. But that open note is the most important part, because that's the gist of doing that. You're creating tension, you're releasing it, and it's a great way of kind of using a passive way of going from one part of your line to another. I use them all the time. One other thing that I really like in A might be something like this. Let's just do that, or something. Let's make it even easier. That's pretty. So it's not always ugly. The idea is to create a little bit of tension and then release that. And those fingerings right there are kind of using these thirds here. So I'm trying to emphasize the open string. That's pretty to me. It just would depend on how you wanted to go from there. But I showed you the kind of a little bit more tension, a little bit of the release, and then another area up here. Those are all really good ways to think about if you're playing over an A chord and you just want to sneak it in. You don't have to do these huge long runs with open strings because they're difficult, and there's a lot of pinky movement in it. So if you want to keep them simple, I gave you three different examples to just spice it up just a little bit. It's like when you're cooking, you don't need to put all the hot spice on the chicken. You can just put a little bit. And I think that that's the important component when you're deciding what works. And where you do that is from practice in playing at home, not around people. And you can see, and if you don't like it and it's not for you, don't use it. I'm not telling you that this is words in concrete. This is the rule. I'm giving you examples of what I've found, why I've developed my style, and what twists my ear sometimes, and what I really like. So everybody is different, and your perspective is valued, and it's the most important thing. You want to do cool stuff that's cool to you. So if it's not for you, that's totally cool. Or you want to have more happy sounding open string licks, that's another way of thinking about it. Jeff?
Awesome. Good stuff. Let's do another performance. I think we got another performance to talk about, right? So tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear with this next performance. We'll do a little breakdown on that.
Yeah. So this is one, I believe this is the one that this is the modern thing, right? The modern country. Okay. So what's happening here is I think of music, or I think of country in three different genres, if you will. Now, there could be more. This could be debatable. I'm just thinking about it in this way. Traditional, which is the older type of music. Think of Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Buck Owens, stuff like that. I think of also the 90s, which is now vintage and classic, but it got rocked up a little bit more. That's when Brent Mason came out. You had, artists like Joe Diffie, Alan Jackson, things that had just a little bit more energy to them, almost grabbing. A big name that comes to mind is Garth Brooks, because you started to use distortion, you started to borrow elements of rock. So now we tie in country to both blues, and now we're tying it in a little bit with rock. And I think I think it's great. I mean, there's Southern rock, there's tons of different stuff. And a lot of these techniques are used by Ed Keane in Skynyrd's tunes. I mean, they're all over the place. So this isn't just tradition, it's straight up country. It's just when you play it with clean tone and it just comes off a little bit different, and you add a little bit of twang, all of a sudden it jumps genres in people's ears and perspective. So you have traditional, 90s, and post Garth, as we say here in Nashville, would be more modern. And I would say that happened around the early 2000s. Once again, this could be debatable, but I wanted to do a tune for my course that was more rocked out, that it said, hey, country players can rock as well. And that's what I did in this. I also thought of this more in the structure that maybe an instrumentalist might do it. So there's a lot. It's quite long. There are multiple sections. This isn't just chord change stuff. That was the idea behind that, was to showcase how to be able to play over just simple patterns. Okay. And that's what you need to do, is start off with simple patterns that you can play over a 1-4-5, then add another chord, add maybe a chord that's outside of diatonic. So in one case, I added a 2 chord or something like that. In these are two different sections that you'll clearly be able to see. And let's go ahead and roll it, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But I was pretty proud of this one, and it's got still all these honky tonk elements. It's just rocked out. Plain and simple. Go ahead, Jeff. Boy, that's a rocker right there. So as you can see, like, I'm trying to combine these different elements, but you add a little bit of distortion to it. I think the great thing about that was I really like that groove, and that's kind of what I'm going to show you, or at least the bass component of that, because it's a complex thing. If you notice, the key component to that lick after the riff that's riff rock, folks. It's straight up riff rock. Was a cool open string line with a little bit of tension, and I really like it. I didn't learn it for this, but listening back, I'm like, I'm pretty proud of that lick. So I hope you dug it. It also showcases two different sections with basically a bridge. So there, if you noticed, it totally went from major, a riff over a 1 chord, we're in the key of E, by the way, to a 6 minor or a C sharp minor type of vibe. And that's where pentatonic would work out quite nicely. If you notice some of the components to my playing. Just had that. And if you notice, those single lines really jumped out when you just put a little bit of a bend on it. And that's what I mean by using those 4 pillars and then just kind of combining certain things. Make the guitar sing. If you can create a melody that's, kind of people can whistle to it, whistle apart, or that it's that simple that the lay person can grab it. Trust me, it goes out to the masses. So when you're thinking about stuff, it's not about throw the kitchen sink at them and make it as complex as possible. I think a lot of what it is making it as musical as possible and making some of your lines, maybe not all, but more like a vocalist. And you can hear the vibrato in certain people's vocalists. I mean, Toby Keith has a lot of vibrato, but stuff like that is kind of mimicking that. A great way to do that is to find your favorite song and literally sit down and by your ear only work out the melody. It's as simple as that, because that's the thread that intertwines the harmony with the song. It is the song. Okay. And as a soloist, if you can mimic that, that is almost more important than going and going through and making things as complex as possible. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it, is that you want to make it musical.
I love it, man. I think, yeah, the musical aspect of that definitely was shining through. Great job. So let's do a question here, because we've got a question about a little bit different thing, but talk about your guitar a little bit. Number one, someone's asking about what string gauges you use, right? The typical, what strings are you using? Tell us about that. And then tell us a little bit about that guitar.
Okay, cool. This is a brand new guitar made by a custom builder in outer parts of Tennessee, in Cleveland, Tennessee, Lucky Dog. And I need it. I'm getting older. My back is starting to hurt. So this is Montana Sugar Pine. So this weighs in at about 5.2 pounds. And so I wanted lightness for the guitar. It's just got a light lacquer on it. And then if you notice on the back, it's just kind of got a little bit of, just a little bit of figuring to it. But it's the Montana Sugar Pine on the body. And then I like the heavy gnarled both volume and tone pot. And the reason being is because I tend to do the Danny Gatton thing quite a bit. So, let me do this again. What it allows you to do is kind of control that. And if you've ever seen me live, I'm dicking around with this stuff all the time. I mean, it's just always this. It's always, like I'm always changing it. It's just a 3 position toggle. And then this was, these are custom wound by Lucky Dog. And this is a kind of modeled after an A3. And then this is their hog leg pickup in the neck. I haven't used any neck. So let's go ahead and just kind of let that shine a little bit. Next pickup setting. So that's kind of the pickup. And then as far as those are the tones that I kind of get. I like that it's got a stringiness to it. And speaking of strings, I use Diodario 10 to 46, the XLs. Sometimes I use the XSs. I have a deal with them, and they've been always great about getting me the strings that I need. I use 10s, and the reason why I use 10s is I've just built up enough strength through playing quite a bit that I like the fatter tone from it. Sometimes I used to do kind of the heavier bottoms. I don't currently. And also keep in mind, when I do play a Strat, I do 11 to 52s. Any humbucking guitar, I'm normally 11 to 52s. And I think that that's what I'd recommend, is to try to do 10s if the hand strength just isn't there. Or let's face it, life gets in the way of like a lot of things, you know, one of them being if you're a hobbyist or you don't have so much time. Do what's comfortable for you. Find what works for you. And if you need to, use 9s. But I love 10s, and I love the Diodario strings as well. And I love this new guitar. It's really great, and it's saving my back, and the tone that I get out of it's really great. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, great guitar. We've got one more performance. Let's do another performance here. And we can talk a little bit about that. I know there's a couple other questions coming in. I know we're going to be running out of time soon. Appreciate all of your time and effort here, Matthew. So if you can stay for
Man, I love doing this. We got to do it again, Jeff. This is like a blast. Like,
absolutely. Well,
it works so much better. If anybody saw the other one, like I'm going to knock on wood right now, man. I mean, like I love teaching, and I love imparting people with information. And I know that when you're working on something, you just kind of want somebody to explain it to you. And I think it's great that we're doing this. And TrueFire is a great source for that. As you mentioned, let's cut to an outlaw groove. Here's another type of feel that you would expect to see or feel when you go to a honky tonk type setting. Made famous by Waylon Jennings. I played for his son. It was great, a great time. I did a record with him and Jesse Coulter. It was phenomenal. Lots of talent, lots of big names around there. But what he was known for is this kind of 4 on the floor groove. And what you're going to hear is some of that chicken picking that I showed you a little bit earlier. It's all over the place. These double stop licks, I kind of do these pedal steel type bends, and I chose it for a reason, because I kind of like it. And, you know, I released this stuff a little while ago, so it's relatively fresh to me. So let's go ahead and cue up that outlaw groove in E, and I'll show you a cool little bend that comes out of that one. Cool. So that's going to be a style that would be, you know, I was doing it as giving an example of what would I do over, you know, an imaginary type of Waylon tune where I get a chance to shine a little bit. So I'm going to show you a lick that starts right from the get-go. If you notice, all these elements are there again. I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is kind of my formula for creating solos, because if you have some of those elements, you're making it, I think, interesting from a standpoint of technicality, and then you're also playing over the chords. It's important to play over the chords and then connect those with different ideas. And I like those open string lines. So which you heard, and I think bar 3. So let's go over a little pedal steel or B bender type of lick. It's a little bit tricky, but I can bring it back a little bit. So I'll show you an alternate if you're like, dude, that's just way too hard. So what you're doing is you're in the key of E, you're playing over an E chord, and you're bending that A note up to B. So it's a full step, and you're using your pinky here on the 12th fret, and then it goes, you go to the 10th fret. So it kind of jumps back from and in between. Okay, so if you want to make it a little bit more fun, you can add some chicken picking elements to it. And all I'm doing at the other part is I'm actually just bringing it down because it goes from E to D. That's another great thing when you're soloing, is to do repetitive type licks that basically are the same thing. You just move them. So if the chord changes, in this case, going from E to D, all you got to do is play a power chord here. It's down 2 frets. So if you do this lick, okay, the D chord comes, and that was over E, drop 2, 1, 2. It's a great way of thinking about soloing, because what it does is it's a simple kind of math game. It makes things easy. And then I end it with, that's another like open string type thing. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. The whole point about showing you this was, you know, being able to play a lick over a chord, and then if another chord changes, you can also, if it were to jump up, let's just put this out there, E to A. Okay, so where do I go? Do I go all the way down? Okay, let's go E to A. So it's 1 full step, 2 full steps, 2.5 full steps. So where am I here? I would go jump all the way up here. Watch this. You could do that because that's the exact same lick. Okay, so the other thing that I kind of would think about, not to make this give you 9 different variations, but this is a cool lick, so it's a good way to go. So what I did there, thinking going from E to A, is I just went into another shape that worked over the chord A. So part of it is just understanding where you are in the neck and what notes work, and that takes a while. Step number 1, learn every note on your fret everywhere. If I were to say, what's the 6th fret on the D string, you should be able to know that and be able to repeat that. It's A flat, by the way, but you know, like, or G sharp. So understand that. Understand notes together that are strung together, like this shape, these common shapes. I didn't talk at all about caged, but that's another way of understanding those, because it's shape based. But those are all really cool licks that you can wind up playing. And I hopefully you dug these 4 different performances that were showcased, and they're on TrueFire right now. The tab is available. The backing tracks are there. There are lessons that break it down way better and way more than what I did tonight. It was just to give you snapshots of what does this stuff sound like put into play. And keep in mind, like, it will help you out with your playing, your practicing, and then the idea is to get a better knowledge base for your performance. And we're all in different areas, so we all don't need to be rock stars. But if you want to get better, come to TrueFire.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. If you want to get better, check out all of Matthew's courses for sure. There's great stuff in there. He breaks stuff down just like this, but as he said, in more detail with the tab for everything. Also, check out his channel at TrueFire if you want to dig in there. And you know, anytime you can study with this guy, I would do it. We've been fans of his for a really long time. Met, I believe, maybe down at Roberts on Broadway. I think was the first time we maybe got together at the NAMM show, and then went and hung out. Maybe it was at Roberts. So appreciate everything you've done, man. Everybody, go check out his courses for sure. And you know, this will be posted back up there. This will be posted on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to go back and pick up these licks and make a little bit. Take your time with them. Slow everything down and really dig in. But thank you so much, Matt, for doing this. How about you play a little bit? How about you just do a little jamming for us on the way out here? Do a little.
Sure. I also want to get a shout out to everybody who's watching us live, and I see some people from Wisconsin and people from all over the country. Thank you so much for the support. It means a lot to me, and there are nothing but kind words. So hopefully you got a little bit of info out of this. I had fun doing it. I'd love to do it again. And I'll just do a quick jam here, which kind of showcases all the different things that we talked about. How I might even use some of the licks. I don't even know what I'm going to do. So here we go.